Have you ever been 10 projects deep and then your board member needs you to research a totally whole new other thing that you have no idea about? If that seems really hard, it's because you're not prioritizing your professional development as a chamber pro. By listening to the Chamber Chat podcast every week, I actually know a little bit more about so many different types of topics that a lot of chambers are doing in the industry that I would otherwise have no access to or no knowledge of. As a Chamber Chat subscriber, I get to hear from specific chambers and real chamber execs about what they're doing. And so I already have a little bit of that background knowledge to lean onto, and I can already tell my board members like, oh, well, I heard of XYZ chamber and this is what they're doing. And then I can actually go back and find a chamber professional to go to try and help ask questions and to get me started on the right track a whole lot quicker than I could do myself. So if you're not subscribed to the Chamber Chat podcast, you're missing out.
Hello, Chamber Champions. Thank you for coming on and checking out my podcast. I'm Brandon Burton, the host of Chamber Chat Podcast, and I thought it could be of value to put together this quick little trailer or a teaser, if you will, about what Chamber Chat Podcast is all about. My background is in chamber publishing. I've been doing that for almost 15 years. And as I go around meeting with different chambers and driving all over the state of Texas where I'm located, I would come across chambers of all different sizes. Some were working really well, very efficiently, doing some really great things in their community. And I could see from their members that they were really well respected. So the members had a high value of what the chamber was doing in their community. And then I would also go to other chambers that I could see just were struggling a little bit. They didn't necessarily have the same resources. They didn't have, the more I found out, they didn't have the same kind of budget, to allow them to go to the state and regional conferences or even ACCE for that matter. So as I was driving all across the state of Texas, I stumbled across podcasting myself and listening to podcasts of different things that interested me, from finance to health to marketing to all sorts of stuff. But then the idea clicked for me. Why not do a podcast for chambers of commerce? And I thought, surely there's got to be one out there, right? Since I'm in the chamber industry, I wanted to check it out. I couldn't find a podcast that was targeted towards chambers of commerce. So I thought, why don't I do that? That whole saying about be the change you want to see in the world, right? So I wanted to provide that resource for chamber professionals to be able to learn from each other, to be able to have a weekly, so this is a weekly podcast, comes out every Tuesday, but I wanted to provide a weekly resource that chamber professionals or chamber champions, which is what I like to call my audience, could go to learn from those top leaders in the industry. So far it's been working out great. I'm coming up on close to 3 years now of doing Chamber Chat Podcast. And I have had the pleasure of having well over 100, coming up on 150 different chamber professionals on the podcast now. So people like Sherry Ann Kelly, David Brown, Jay Byers, so many great people. Dave Atkinson, loved having him on, talked about his new book, as well as Casey Steinbacher talking about her book, Relevant to Essential. So really, really good industry leaders and consultants as well. Had Doug Holman from Holman Brothers Membership Sales Solutions, Sherry Pash, just the list goes on and on. Anyways, a lot of neat tips and nuggets you can get from these different individuals that I have on the podcast. I really like the format of a podcast. I know, some people prefer looking at videos as they scroll through their social media feed, but for me, I like podcasts. I like being able to listen while I'm in the car driving, when I go for a walk, when I'm in the gym working out. There's so many different ways that I can access a podcast where I can actually tune in when I'm ready to listen and engage. Where oftentimes when I'm scrolling through my Facebook or social media, if we're being honest, I'm just tuning out. So a podcast has a great relevancy for that. And along those lines, it's become a passion of mine to help chambers to get into the podcasting space himself. We saw a lot of chambers make that, what I call the podcast pivot, during the COVID shutdowns, early 2020. And chambers reaching out to me saying, how do you do it? How do we get started? We're trying to figure out how to connect with our membership and our community when we can't gather in large groups. So I was able to help some chambers get online with their podcast. And I actually created a free podcast guide. So if you're interested in checking that out, that's at chamberchatpodcast.com/pivot. And you can access that free chamber podcasting guide if you have an interest in checking out what podcasting is all about. But it's my hope that you can get some value out of Chamber Chat Podcast. I enjoy connecting with all of you. If we're not connected on LinkedIn yet, please reach out and connect. Follow Chamber Chat Podcast on Facebook, and be sure to subscribe to Chamber Chat Podcast in your favorite podcast app, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or some other different podcast player. I know there's a lot out there, so please look us up, Chamber Chat Podcast, hit that subscribe button, and you'll get a fresh episode every week delivered right to your phone. So thank you for being here. Thanks for checking out this little trailer. And I want to hand this over and hear what some others have to say about Chamber Chat Podcast.
No, thanks, Brandon. Really appreciate what you do. Providing that resource for chamber leaders, I think is really important. As I said before, with those resources, it's a big deal in terms of professional development.
And I appreciate what you're doing with this podcast. It's very, very good for the profession.
Brandon, thank you, and thank you again for everything you're doing for our line of work and for chambers across the country. It makes a huge difference, and I know you've done a lot to help support us, and we really, on behalf of a grateful profession, thank you.
So you and a few others have inspired me. So I'm on episode 21 of my new podcast, Michael Loves Indie. I'm not, I do it evenings and weekends so that I can talk to whoever I want to talk to. So it's not a program of the chamber. It's purely a personal project. I would hate to develop a queue of like board members who wanted to be interviewed. So I talked to musicians, I talked to community leaders, and you and a few other people have really inspired me. So I'm on episode 21. You can find Michael Loves Indie on any podcast platform that you use.
Of course, have listened to several past episodes of leaders in our industry that I greatly admire and respect. So it's quite the honor to be a guest.
I'm a big fan, and I often take you on my run or when I'm mowing or something, listening to great experts in the industry.
One of the things that's so exciting about Brandon Burton's Chamber Chat Podcast is the idea that you get to listen to other chambers throughout the country and learn what they're doing to make themselves and their business community successful, but also some of the challenges they faced over the last year or so. We've all been a bit isolated, and a lot of times this was the one connection you had to other parts of the country and to other type of business organizations that faced unprecedented challenges, really. So it's always exciting to listen to how chambers are connecting with their business community. I was lucky enough to be a guest on one of Brandon's episodes, and I think one of the things I said was the chambers that are going to be most successful are the ones that are able to tell the story, not just tell the story of their chamber, but tell the chamber of their community and their business community. And through Brandon's Chamber Chat Podcast, I think that gives them the perfect opportunity, the perfect avenue to do that.
I would love for you to subscribe to Chamber Chat Podcast in your favorite podcast app, and stay tuned each week as I continue to introduce you to people and ideas to better help you serve your chamber members and your community.